We then have to talk about other interesting shit, and that is the situation in Iran. Because Iranian officials have basically contradicted every major victory that the Trump administration has claimed in ongoing peace talks. And it's just impossible to know who to believe because the administration has lied so much up to this point. For many, they've become just as unreliable as a notorious authoritarian regime. And so one of the things, for example, while speaking to reporters yesterday in Switzerland, where the talks are currently underway, you had Vice President JD Vance announcing that Iran had agreed to allow international inspections of their nuclear facilities.
And this is probably what we're most excited about as Americans. The Iranians have agreed to invite IAEA inspectors back into their country. That is a major milestone for the American people and the first step in permanently denuclearizing or permanently ending a nuclear weapons program in Iran. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. That's exactly what we asked to happen.
But then, among other pushback, you had people quickly pointing out that this new concession that Vance is painting as America's new crowning achievement, it's actually something that we already had under Obama's nuclear deal.
For decades, inspectors will have access to Iran's entire nuclear supply chain, from the uranium mines and mills where they get raw materials, to the centrifuge production facilities where they make machines to enrich it. And under the terms of the deal, inspectors will have the permanent ability to inspect any suspicious sites in Iran.
Right, Iran was literally already subject to regular inspections and had actively agreed to stronger monitoring. But Trump, he famously threw that away and has repeatedly condemned it as being too weak. And while for a while, Iran did still allow inspections of some of its sites after Trump tore up the deal, since Trump and Israel started bombing Iran last June, they've banned inspectors from visiting the facilities that have been targeted in the ongoing attacks. And so basically, this would be Trump reinstating a key element of the Obama deal that he tore up, and then trying to gaslight you into being excited about this massive achievement that he allegedly succeeded in securing. Right? And I say allegedly because one of the other things is that top Iranian officials have already refuted that announcement, saying they never agreed to the nuclear inspections. In fact, one official even told the state-run media outlet that Iran didn't negotiate on its nuclear program at all during the talks with Vance. But then with that this morning, you had Trump taking a swing, writing on Truth Social. Despite their protestations and false statements to the contrary, coupled with the drumbeat of the fake news, which is doing everything possible to make the US victory as small and insignificant as possible, Iran has fully and completely agreed to highest level nuclear inspections long into the future, infinity. And adding, if they did not agree to this, there would be no further negotiations. Though notably here, we did see the director of the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency saying in an interview that his agency will be inspecting Iran's enrichment facilities. But it's also unclear where he got that information because Iranian officials, they've denied having any meetings with the agency director. But then that's also not the only place that Iranian administration officials have contradicted each other. Or just yesterday, Trump's Treasury Secretary announced on Twitter that the administration was temporarily lifting oil sanctions against Iran for the next 60 days, saying that the decision was the result of ongoing productive talks. And I just really need you to know how absolutely enormous that move is. It's why you have some outlets describing it as the most sweeping rollback of American oil sanctions against Iran since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. This is a massive reversal of decades-long policy that's aimed at undermining Iran's economy. And this decision, it will bring huge economic benefits to Iran. You've got experts saying that the temporary lifting of sanctions, it could unlock around 67 million barrels of Iranian crude, netting the regime as much as $8 or $9 billion. And that's by no means the only area that the Iranian regime stands to profit. You also had Iranian officials claiming that they had made progress in their push to get the US to unfreeze $24 billion in frozen assets. Or with Iran's central bank governor telling an Iranian news agency that the necessary memorandums were signed during the first day of talks. And that was also echoed by Iran's top negotiator who said that Iran had reached an agreement to release $12 billion in frozen funds. So you didn't have US officials officially confirming the release, and Vance has said that if the assets are unfrozen, Iran would have to spend them on US agricultural goods such as soy and wheat. But today, Iran's ambassador to the UN told reporters that they had not agreed to those terms and that Iran alone would get to decide how to use its unfrozen funds, saying Iran is the only country to decide what to do with its assets, which are going to be defrozen. And so I reject any claim about that if there would be any role for any other country to have an influence on the decisions or on those processes. But you also had Trump himself appearing to contradict that, writing the money and or sanctions that the US Treasury is releasing goes into escrow, controlled by the USA, and will be used for the purchase of food and medical supplies exclusively from the United States, including corn, wheat, and soybeans from our great American farmers. And then also beyond that, there's been contradictory accounts of what is going on with the Strait of Hormuz. And that's including from within the Trump administration itself. Right in the same post, Trump said that because Iran agreed to nuclear inspections and other major concessions, he has agreed to allow the Hormuz Strait to remain open with no further naval blockade. Though he also added that all ships are remaining in place should it be necessary to reinstitute the blockade, which he said was highly unlikely. But then, minutes later, he claimed that 19 million barrels of oil flowed out of the Hormuz Strait yesterday, an all-time record. And so, there are a few things we have to unpack. First of all, Trump had already agreed agreed to end his blockade on the strait before negotiations officially kicked off, which was a crucial part of even starting the talks. So this effort to kind of paint this as a reward that he's giving Iran for making concessions to him, that appears to be total bullshit, especially because you have Iran denying that it even agreed to nuclear inspections. There's also, I'll say, zero evidence right now for Trump's claim that 19 million barrels of oil flowed out of the strait yesterday. And it's also difficult to see how that would even be possible if ships are, quote, remaining in place, as he stated in the earlier post. In fact, we've seen reports that just 109 vessels passed through the strait between Saturday and Monday. That's a fraction of the more than 130 that transited the waterway every day before the war. And while yeah, that is a significant number after months of blockades, it seems physically impossible that it could have broken any kind of record. Beyond that, while Trump's kind of painted the reopening of the strait as a major win that he secured, Iranian officials, they've used it to reassert their own sovereignty, or with Iran's chief negotiator seemingly contradicting Trump entirely, telling state media overnight that the waterway will never return to its pre-war conditions and will be administered by the Islamic Republic of Iran in accordance with international law. And today you had both Oman and Iran emphasizing their claims to sovereignty over the strait in a joint statement where they also raised the possibility of charging fees for passage. Now, a big thing with that is that charging tolls for passage, that would violate international law. Then also, despite that, you've also seen Trump threatening to do the same if a peace deal with Iran isn't reached within the 60-day deadline. And then you also had Secretary of State Marco Rubio seemingly contradicting both Iranian officials and Trump himself, with him telling reporters no country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. And so with so many things being contradicted, so many conflicting claims, you've got so many people just going, what the hell is going on? How are we gonna lock down a serious deal with unserious people? Arguing that like everything with this pointless war of choice, they can't seem to get their story straight and their goals, it's just a moving target. And that's also something you've seen commentators like Jon Stewart hitting on his show last night.
I guess the theory is, why trade smaller concessions with Iran for peace when we could instead lose a war with them and make bigger concessions? Well, I hope you learned your lesson, Iran. There's plenty more concessions where that came from. You mouth off again, and you're getting Greenland. All right, but that's fine. Let's just make the best of it.
But also understand, it's not just people on the left who've slammed the administration. You also have people like Ben Shapiro digging it.
Also, by the way, we have now released openly billions of dollars in oil money to go to the Iranians in frozen funds. So things are going great. This is not an accomplishment. It is not. Iran's saying, sure, come on in. We'll allow you to look at the things we allow you to look at, and then we won't allow you to look at the things we don't allow you to look at. And also, we'll rebuild our ballistic missiles, which are not part of the negotiations, and we'll rebuild our terror support, which is not part of the negotiations, and yeah, we'll keep tolling the Strait of Hormuz. Like, what are we even doing here? What are we even doing here? The idea that some sort of win has been achieved here is unbelievably silly. Not only has it not been achieved in these negotiations, the vice president looked extraordinarily weak.
With Shapiro also repeatedly taking aim at Vance in particular, accusing him of being a weak amateur and failing to uphold Trump's America First policy in the negotiations.
Meanwhile, however, Vice President JD Vance spent the weekend looking weak in front of the Qataris, the Pakistanis, and most of all, the Iranians. In fact, I've never seen a weaker look from a Republican politician. That is not peace through strength, it is war through weakness. Get the amateurs back on the bench, get the professionals back in the game.
Of course, I'd love to know your thoughts on all of this. The Shapiro stuff, it stands out to me. One, because Shapiro is just such a fucking coward. But he goes after Vance because he's fucking terrified of Trump. Because Ben, too, you know what is weak? Trump's so-called art of the deal, which at this point should be the art of the kneel. He makes countless threats and deadlines, and then nothing. He moves that red line in the sand again. He trains people to not take him serious. Yeah. Make it all about Vance, let him be your whipping boy, and trick people that still listen to you somewhere into thinking that you speak some truth to power.